Imagine dedicating your life to faith, love, and service, only to find yourself cast out, humiliated, and accused of a crime you didn't commit. That's exactly what happened to Sor Clara, a devoted young novice who believed her path was clear, until betrayal shattered her world. She was accused of stealing sacred relics from the Santa Rosa Convent, but the truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. This isn't just a story of injustice. It's a tale of courage, resilience, and the fight against corruption hidden within the walls of a place meant to be sacred. Today, we'll uncover the shocking truth behind Sor Clara's wrongful expulsion, her desperate quest for justice, and the dark secrets lurking in the convent's shadows. Stay with us until the end, because what she discovered will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive into Sor Clara's extraordinary journey. Sor Clara had always known she was destined for a life of faith. From an early age, she felt drawn to the church, finding solace in prayer, discipline, and the quiet promise of devotion. When she arrived at the Santa Rosa Convent, she believed she had found her purpose. The other nuns welcomed her, and the daily rhythm of prayer, study, and service fulfilled her in ways nothing else ever had. But beneath the tranquil exterior of the convent, secrets festered like a hidden wound. For years, Santa Rosa had been a place of spiritual refuge, a sanctuary for those who had devoted themselves to God. But something changed when Sor Veronica arrived. Unlike the others, she carried herself with a subtle air of authority that didn't match her status as a newly arrived nun. At first, Clara thought she was simply adjusting to life in the convent, but it wasn't long before she noticed strange things happening. Sacred objects vanished without explanation, whispers filled the halls late at night, and there was an undeniable tension among the elder nuns. Clara tried to ignore these signs, but then something happened that changed everything. One morning, as she was helping clean the chapel, she overheard Sor Beatrice, one of the elder nuns, speaking in hushed tones with Sor Veronica. They stood near the altar, their voices low but urgent. Clara froze, gripping the wooden pew tightly as she strained to hear. "The bishop is already asking questions," Sor Beatrice muttered. "If we don't act soon, they'll come looking." Sor Veronica's voice was cold, calculated. "Then we need a distraction." A chill ran down Clara's spine. A distraction? What were they hiding? Later that evening, Clara made her way to the convent's archives. If something was wrong, she needed to know. She spent hours searching through old records, trying to find anything suspicious. That's when she found it. A list of artifacts once housed in the convent. Dozens of them were marked as missing. She had no time to process what she had found before the bell rang for evening prayer. Shoving the papers back into their place, she hurried out of the archives, her mind racing. But as she rounded the corner, she bumped into Sor Veronica. The older nun's eyes narrowed as she looked Clara up and down. "What are you doing out so late?" Clara swallowed hard. "I was just finishing some cleaning." Sor Veronica held her gaze for a moment before nodding slowly. "Good. We wouldn't want anyone to think you were somewhere you shouldn't be." It was a warning. Clara felt it in her bones. The next morning, everything came crashing down. She was summoned to the Mother Superior's chambers, where Sor Beatrice and Sor Veronica were already waiting. On the wooden table before them lay a small, ornate crucifix, one of the missing relics. Mother Superior's face was grave. "Sor Clara, this was found in your cell." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "That's not possible. I've never seen it before." Sor Veronica folded her arms. "And yet, there it is." Panic clawed at Clara's chest. "I didn't take it. Someone must have put it there." Sor Beatrice sighed, shaking her head. "The evidence speaks for itself." Clara turned to Mother Superior, desperate. "Please, you have to believe me. I would never steal from the convent." But the decision had already been made. Within hours, Clara was stripped of her novice robes and expelled from the only home she had ever known. As she stepped outside the convent's gates, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind her, she felt utterly lost. But if they thought she would disappear quietly, they were wrong. Clara had spent her life believing in justice, in truth, and she knew, deep in her heart, that she had been framed. Someone inside the convent was responsible for the missing relics, and they had used her as a scapegoat. She had to prove her innocence. With nowhere else to go, Clara sought refuge in the small town near the convent. She found shelter with an elderly woman named Doña Elena, who had once been a seamstress for the convent. The woman took her in without question, offering her a warm meal and a place to rest. "I always knew something wasn't right in that place," Doña Elena said, as she set a bowl of soup in front of Clara. "Strange people coming and going at night. And that new nun, Sor Veronica. Something about her gives me chills." Clara hesitated before speaking. "I think she's involved in something terrible, but I don't know how to prove it." Doña Elena studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then you'll need to be careful. If they framed you once, they won't hesitate to do worse." The next few days were a blur of planning. Clara knew she had to return to the convent, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. That's when she remembered Father Miguel, the local priest who had always been kind to her. If anyone would believe her, it was him. When she arrived at the church, Father Miguel greeted her with a look of concern. "Clara, what are you doing here? I heard what happened." She took a deep breath. "Father, I was framed. Someone inside the convent is stealing sacred relics, and I think Sor Veronica is involved." He studied her carefully before nodding. "Tell me everything." "Do." As she recounted the events of the past few days, Father Miguel's expression darkened. "If what you're saying is true, this is not just theft. This is a betrayal of faith." Clara nodded. "I need to get back inside. I need proof." Father Miguel sighed. "That won't be easy, but there may be a way." With his help, Clara devised a plan. The convent had a small, unused storage room near the back entrance, one that she knew wasn't regularly checked. If she could slip inside undetected, she could search for more evidence. The night was cold as Clara made her way toward the convent, her heart pounding in her chest. Dressed in a simple cloak to blend in, she moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. When she reached the back entrance, she held her breath and tried the door. It was unlocked. Slipping inside, she moved carefully through the empty halls. The convent was silent, the only sound her own breathing. She made her way toward the archives, hoping to find more records of the missing relics. But as she rounded the corner, she froze. Sor Veronica was there, speaking in hushed tones with a man in a dark suit. Clara ducked behind a column, straining to hear. "The bishop will never suspect a thing," the man said. "As long as we move quickly, we can have the last shipment out by the end of the week." Sor Veronica nodded. "Good. Sor Beatriz has already ensured no one will ask questions." Clara's blood ran cold. It was worse than she had imagined. The thefts weren't random. They were organized. A network of smugglers operating from within the convent itself. She had to get out. But as she turned to leave, she felt a hand clamp down on her wrist. She gasped, whipping around to find Sor Beatriz staring at her, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, child," the older nun said softly. Clara's mind raced. Had Sor Beatriz known she was there all along? Was she about to turn her in, or was there something more? Before she could react, Sor Beatriz whispered, "If you want the truth, you'll need more than just words." Then, to Clara's shock, she let go of her wrist and stepped aside. Was it a warning? Or was Sor Beatriz giving her a chance? Clara didn't wait to find out. She turned and fled, her heart hammering. She had proof now, but was it enough? And the biggest question of all remained. If Sor Beatriz was part of this, why had she let Clara go? This story is only getting deeper, and the truth may be far more dangerous than Clara ever imagined. If you're as invested as we are, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Sor Beatriz is truly involved in the smuggling, or could she be an ally in disguise? Stay tuned because what happens next will leave you speechless. Clara barely noticed the cold night air as she fled the convent, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind reeled from what she had just overheard. The smuggling operation was real, and Sor Veronica was at the center of it, but Sor Beatrice's actions confused her. Why had the older nun let her go? Was she truly involved, or was she trying to help in her own way? She reached the small house where Doña Elena was waiting, her wrinkled hands clasped in worry. "Child, you're shaking." "What happened?" Clara sat down, struggling to catch her breath. "I heard them. Sor Veronica. She's working with someone outside the convent. They're smuggling religious artifacts. I heard them talking about another shipment leaving soon." Doña Elena's expression darkened. "And Sor Beatrice?" Clara hesitated. "She caught me, but she let me go." The older woman frowned. "That means something. She could have turned you in, but she didn't. Either she's having doubts or she's in deeper than you realize." Clara exhaled shakily. "I need proof, real proof. I need to stop them before they take anything else." Doña Elena placed a warm hand over Clara's. "Then you have to be careful, child. You've already been framed once. If they suspect you're getting closer to the truth, they won't hesitate to do worse." Clara knew she was right. The next step had to be precise. She needed hard evidence, something undeniable. The following morning, she met with Father Miguel again, explaining everything she had learned. The priest's face was grim as he listened. "If these men are taking artifacts from the convent, they are desecrating sacred objects for profit. This is not just a crime, it is a betrayal of faith." Clara nodded. "We have to expose them." Father Miguel thought for a moment. "There's only one way. We need to catch them in the act." Clara's stomach clenched. "That means going back inside." The priest met her gaze. "Yes, but this time you won't be alone." With Father Miguel's help, Clara devised a plan. The convent storage cellar was the most likely place for the artifacts to be kept before they were smuggled out. If she could get inside and document what she found, they could bring the evidence to the bishop or even the authorities. That night, dressed in dark clothing, Clara made her way back toward the convent. This time, Father Miguel had arranged for a trusted friend, a local investigator, to wait nearby. If anything went wrong, help would be close. The convent was quiet as she slipped through the same back entrance she had used before. The halls were dimly lit, the only sound her own careful footsteps. She knew where she had to go, the cellar beneath the kitchen. It was rarely used, making it the perfect hiding spot for stolen relics. She reached the heavy wooden door leading to the storage room and pressed her ear against it. Silence. Taking a deep breath, she slowly pushed it open. The air inside was damp, the scent of old wood and stone filling her lungs. She stepped inside and scanned the shelves. At first, everything looked normal. Stacks of old books, bags of grain, candles for the chapel. But then, in the corner, something caught her eye. A wooden crate partially covered by a cloth. Her heart pounded as she knelt beside it and lifted the cloth. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were several ornate chalices, crucifixes, and golden candelabras, items that had been reported missing. Clara felt her breath catch. This was it, the proof she needed. Reaching into her cloak, she pulled out a small camera Father Miguel had given her. She quickly took several photos, ensuring that the evidence would not be lost, no matter what happened next. But as she turned to leave, she heard footsteps. Her body went rigid. Someone was coming. She barely had time to hide behind a stack of crates before the door creaked open. Through a small gap, she saw Sor Veronica step inside, followed by the same well-dressed man Clara had seen before. "The last shipment leaves tomorrow," the man said in a hushed tone. "Are you sure no one suspects anything?" Sor Veronica scoffed. "Please, the only person who got too close is long gone." Clara's blood boiled at the mention of herself. The man nodded. "Good. Then let's finish this and disappear before the bishop starts asking too many questions." As they moved toward the crate, Clara knew she had to get out before they discovered her. Holding her breath, she crept along the wall, inching toward the door. But then, her foot knocked over a small tin bowl. The sound echoed through the cellar. Saw Veronica's head snapped in her direction. "Who's there?" Clara's heart leaped into her throat. She turned and ran. "Stop her!" Saw Veronica shouted. Clara didn't look back. She bolted up the stairs, her feet barely touching the ground. She heard footsteps chasing after her, but she knew the convent's layout better than they did. She darted through the kitchen, past the chapel, and toward the back entrance. Just as she reached the door, a hand grabbed her wrist. Saw Veronica's grip was iron tight. "You meddling little fool," she hissed. "You think you can stop this?" Clara struggled, her heart hammering. "I already have." Before Saw Veronica could react, Clara twisted free and shoved the door open, running into the night. Father Miguel and the investigator were waiting. "She has proof," Father Miguel said as the investigator stepped forward. "Saw Veronica, you're coming with us." The older nun paled. "You have nothing." Clara held up the camera. "I have everything." The investigator nodded. "We'll see what the authorities have to say." Saw Veronica glared at Clara, her expression venomous. "You think this is over?" Clara squared her shoulders. "No, but you're finished." The next few days were a whirlwind. The bishop was informed, the authorities were called, and an investigation was launched into the smuggling ring. The man working with Saw Veronica was arrested, and after pressure from the bishop, she was removed from the convent in disgrace. But one mystery remained: Saw Beatrice. Clara still didn't understand why the older nun had let her go. She needed answers. She found Saw Beatrice alone in the chapel, lighting a candle. When the older nun saw her, she smiled faintly. "You did it, child." Clara stepped closer. "You knew, didn't you?" Saw Beatrice sighed. "I suspected, but I had no proof, and confronting them directly would have only made things worse." Clara hesitated. "Then why did you let me go that night?" Saw Beatrice's eyes softened. "Because I knew you would do what I could not." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "But you helped them." Saw Beatrice nodded slowly. "At first I thought I was protecting the convent. When I realized the truth, it was too late. But I never stopped hoping that someone would uncover what was happening." Clara studied the older nun for a long moment. "Will you stay?" Saw Beatrice smiled sadly. "If the bishop allows it. But I think my time here is coming to an end." As Clara left the chapel that night, she felt a deep sense of closure. The convent was no longer tainted by corruption. Justice had been served. But more than that, she had found her own strength. Santa Rosa would never be the same. But maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. If you've made it this far, what do you think? Was Saw Beatrice a coward for not stopping the smuggling earlier, or was she right to wait for the truth to come out? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible story. Stay tuned, because sometimes the most unexpected betrayals hide in the places we trust the most. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt a sense of relief. Saw Veronica was gone. The authorities were involved, and the stolen relics would be returned. But something still weighed on her heart. She had won the battle, but had she truly restored the sanctity of Santa Rosa? The next morning, Clara walked through the convent halls, feeling the stares of the other nuns. Some were filled with admiration, others with suspicion. Though Saw Veronica was removed, the scandal had shaken the convent to its core. The bishop had sent word that an official investigation would follow, but until then, life inside Santa Rosa continued, though with a heavy cloud hanging over it. Clara was no longer a novice, at least not officially. She had been expelled, and until the bishop reviewed the case, her fate within the convent remained uncertain. She sat in the courtyard, hands clasped together, when Saw Beatrice approached her. "You're troubled," the older nun said. Clara exhaled. "It's not over." Sor Beatrice sat beside her, her movements slow and deliberate. It never truly is. Clara turned to face her. Even with Sor Veronica gone, there are others who allowed this to happen, others who looked the other way. How can I trust that Santa Rosa won't fall into the same corruption again? Sor Beatrice was silent for a moment, then said, "That depends on the ones who stay." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" The elder nun met her gaze. Sor Veronica was powerful, yes, but she thrived because people allowed her to. Fear, silence, blind obedience, those were her true weapons. Clara clenched her fists. "Then we need to change that." A small smile touched Sor Beatrice's lips. "And how do you propose we do that?" Clara took a deep breath. "By teaching the sisters to think for themselves, to recognize manipulation, to understand the true meaning of faith. Not blind devotion, but the courage to stand against wrongdoing." Sor Beatrice studied her carefully. "That is a noble thought. But do you think the others will listen?" Clara straightened. "They will, if we show them." The next few days were spent laying the foundation of change. Clara knew she needed allies, so she started by speaking to the younger novices, those who had once looked up to Sor Veronica and now felt lost. She shared what she had learned, not just about the smuggling, but about the importance of questioning authority when necessary. At first, some resisted. "We are here to follow the word of God," one novice, Sor Camilla, said hesitantly. "Not to question our superiors." Clara nodded. "True. But what happens when our superiors twist his word for their own gain? Wouldn't faith demand we fight for truth?" Sor Camilla hesitated. I suppose so." Slowly, more began to listen. Even some of the older nuns who had lived under Sor Veronica's rule in silence began to speak up. Stories emerged, small moments of doubt, of fear, of turning away instead of acting. Clara realized how deeply fear had rooted itself in Santa Rosa. And if fear was the disease, then truth was the cure. One evening, as she helped prepare for Vespers, Sor Beatrice approached her with a knowing smile. "They're listening to you." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "I think they want to change. They just didn't know they could." The elder nun nodded. "And what about you?" Clara paused. "What about me?" Sor Beatrice's expression softened. "You were expelled, child. You have no obligation to stay. The bishop will likely reinstate you, but you could also choose to leave." Clara's heart clenched at the thought. She had dreamed of being part of this convent, of dedicating her life to it, but after everything, could she still belong here? "I don't know," she admitted. Sor Beatrice placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then perhaps it's time to ask yourself, are you staying for faith or for justice?" Clara spent the night wrestling with that question. The following day she received word. The bishop had arrived. The entire convent gathered in the main hall as Bishop Andres stood before them, his face grave. The investigation was not yet over, but enough evidence had been presented to confirm that Santa Rosa had been compromised. "I am deeply troubled by what has happened here," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "A place meant to be devoted to God was instead used as a hub for crime. This cannot be ignored." Clara watched him closely. Would he dismantle Santa Rosa? Would the convent be shut down? But then he turned to her. "I have heard much about you, Sor Clara." Her heart pounded. "Your Grace. You uncovered this deception. You exposed the corruption that tainted these walls." He studied her carefully. "Tell me, child, what do you believe should happen next?" A hush fell over the room. Clara swallowed. She had not expected to be asked this, but she already knew her answer. "This convent should not be closed," she said firmly. "The ones responsible are gone, but the rest of us, we are not the same women we were before. We have seen what happens when we stay silent, and we won't let it happen again." A murmur spread through the hall. Bishop Andres considered her words. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Very well." He turned to the assembled sisters. "Santa Rosa will remain, but there will be changes. There will be accountability. And there will be those watching to ensure that what happened here never happens again. Clara exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning. That evening, as she stood in the courtyard, Sor Beatrice approached her once more. "You spoke well today," the older nun said. Clara smiled. "I spoke the truth." Sor Beatrice chuckled softly. "And what of your own future?" Clara looked out at the garden, at the convent walls that had once felt like a prison, but now felt like something else, something stronger. "I think I'll stay," she said finally. "Not just for faith, not just for justice, but for those who come after me." Sor Beatrice nodded in approval. And so, Sor Clara remained at Santa Rosa, not as the girl who had been framed, not as the novice who had been cast out, but as a woman who had fought for the truth and won. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. If you followed this story all the way to the end, what do you think? Did Clara make the right choice by staying at the convent? Or should she have left and started anew? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible story. Because sometimes the most unexpected heroes are found in the unlikeliest of places. Stay tuned, because the truth always finds a way. Life at Santa Rosa did not immediately return to normal. The wounds left behind by Sor Veronica's betrayal ran deep, and many of the nuns struggled to reconcile their faith with the deception that had taken place within their own walls. Some wondered if they should leave, questioning whether they had been naive in their devotion. Others clung even more fiercely to their faith, desperate to believe that what had happened was an anomaly, not a reflection of the institution itself. Clara, however, saw things differently. The experience had changed her. She no longer viewed the convent through the same innocent lens as before. She understood now that blind faith could be dangerous, that corruption could take root anywhere, even in a place meant to be holy. But she also knew that faith, when tempered with courage and wisdom, could be a force of justice. And so, she dedicated herself to ensuring that what happened at Santa Rosa would never happen again. She started by requesting permission from the bishop to establish a program within the convent, one that focused on teaching critical thinking, ethics, and history. Traditionally, nuns were taught obedience, humility, and discipline, but Clara believed they also needed knowledge, awareness, and the ability to question things that did not seem right. At first, her request was met with resistance. "This is not a school," Mother Superior said firmly when Clara presented her idea. "The convent is a place of worship and devotion." Clara stood her ground. "Yes, but devotion without understanding can be dangerous. If the sisters here had been taught to recognize manipulation, to see the signs of deception, perhaps Sor Veronica would never have succeeded." Mother Superior hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "And you believe teaching them these things will prevent future corruption? I believe it will give them the tools to defend themselves," Clara said, "and to defend the sanctity of this place." After much deliberation, the bishop approved her request on a trial basis. And so, Clara began. She gathered a small group of novices, some skeptical, some eager, and began teaching them about the history of religious institutions, the good and the bad. She taught them about figures in history who had used faith to manipulate others, as well as those who had fought against such injustices. She posed difficult questions. What does it mean to be truly faithful? Is it obedience without question, or is it standing against wrongdoing even when those in authority are the ones committing it? The discussions were intense, sometimes uncomfortable, but slowly a shift began to happen. The younger sisters started to ask their own questions, to analyze rather than simply accept. One evening, Sor Camilla, who had once been one of the most obedient novices, approached Clara after a lesson. "I never thought about faith this way before," she admitted. I always believed that questioning meant doubt. That doubt meant weakness. Clara smiled gently. Doubt is not weakness. It's the beginning of understanding. Word of Clara's teaching spread, and soon even some of the older nuns began to listen. Not everyone agreed with her, but the most important thing was that they were thinking for themselves. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. One afternoon, Clara was called to Mother Superior's chambers, where she found Sor Beatrice waiting as well. "You're causing quite a stir," Mother Superior said, though there was no malice in her tone. Clara clasped her hands. "I only want to help." Mother Superior sighed. "There are those who believe you are trying to change too much, too quickly." Clara looked to Sor Beatrice, who gave her a knowing glance but said nothing. Mother Superior continued. "Some believe that questioning authority will lead to chaos." Clara took a deep breath. "With respect, Mother, isn't that what allowed Sor Veronica to thrive? No one questioned her, no one stood up to her, and that nearly destroyed this convent." Mother Superior was silent for a long moment. Then, to Clara's surprise, she nodded. "You're right," she admitted. "I was blind to what was happening under my own roof, and perhaps it is time for a new way of thinking." Clara exhaled, relief washing over her. "But be careful," Mother Superior warned. "Change does not come without resistance, and not all battles can be won with words." Clara understood the warning, but she also knew that she could not stop. One evening, while walking through the convent gardens, she spotted Sor Beatrice sitting alone on a bench. The older nun looked tired, as if the weight of years of secrets had finally begun to take their toll. Clara hesitated before sitting beside her. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Sor Beatrice gave her a sad smile. "I think my time here is done." Clara's chest tightened. "Because of what happened?" Sor Beatrice shook her head. "Because my role here has ended. I've spent too many years in silence, too many years allowing fear to guide my actions. You are the future of this convent, Clara. You and the ones who come after you." Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I'm going to miss you." Sor Beatrice reached over and took her hand. "And you. But remember, faith is not just prayer. It is action. It is justice. Never forget that." A week later, Sor Beatrice left the convent, and Clara felt her absence deeply, but she also felt more determined than ever to continue the work she had started. Months passed, and the changes in Santa Rosa became undeniable. The novices were more engaged, more aware. Corruption would not find an easy home here again. And Clara, she was no longer a novice. The bishop had officially reinstated her, but not as she once was. She was now a guiding voice in Santa Rosa, a leader not just in prayer but in thought. She had found her place, not as a blind follower, not as a victim, but as a force of change. And the lesson she had learned would remain with her for the rest of her life. Faith, real faith, was not about submission. It was about standing for the truth, even when no one else would. Even when it cost everything, even when it meant questioning the very place you called home. What do you think? Should faith always be unquestioning, or is it stronger when it allows room for doubt and understanding? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. More stories like this are coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Because sometimes the most powerful faith is the one that refuses to be silent. Months passed, and Santa Rosa was no longer the same place it had once been. The shadows of its past still lingered, but they no longer defined it. The sisters walked the halls with a new sense of purpose. Their faith no longer built on blind obedience, but on a foundation of awareness, wisdom, and strength. And at the center of it all was Clara. Her journey had been painful, full of betrayal, doubt, and hardship. But she had come out of it stronger, with a deeper understanding of faith than she had ever imagined. She had thought faith meant submission, accepting things as they were, but now she knew the truth. Faith was standing up when others bowed down. Faith was questioning when things didn't feel right. Faith was fighting for justice, even when it was dangerous. And it was this kind of faith that Santa Rosa would be built upon from now on. One evening, as Clara stood in the chapel lighting a candle, she felt a presence beside her. She turned to see Mother Superior watching her with quiet contemplation. "You've changed this place," the older woman said softly. Clara smiled, looking at the flickering flame. "No, this place changed itself. I just helped show the way." Mother Superior studied her for a long moment before nodding. "The bishop has approved your program permanently. What you started here will continue long after you." Clara felt her heart swell. She had done what she set out to do, not just prove her innocence, not just expose the corruption, but ensure that Santa Rosa would never again be a place where fear and silence reigned. But now a new question lingered in her mind. What came next? The answer came in the form of a letter, one that arrived a week later. It was from a convent in another city, one that had heard of the changes happening at Santa Rosa. They wanted Clara to visit, to share her teachings, to help them build something similar. Clara read the letter over and over, feeling a deep pull inside her chest. She had found her place at Santa Rosa, but maybe her mission didn't end here. Maybe it was only beginning. That night, she sat in the garden staring at the stars. She thought about everything she had endured, the accusations, the betrayal, the fear, the fight. And yet, despite all of it, she was still here, stronger than before. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she had been given this path for a reason. The next morning, she met with Mother Superior. "I think it's time," Clara said. Mother Superior nodded, as if she had expected this. "Where will you go?" Clara held up the letter. "Wherever I'm needed." Mother Superior smiled. "Then go with God," saw Clara. As Clara walked through the halls of Santa Rosa one last time, she felt no sadness, only purpose. She had been a victim. She had been an outcast. Now she was something else entirely. She was a force of change. And as she stepped beyond the gates of Santa Rosa, she knew that her story was far from over. Because faith, true faith, wasn't about staying in one place. It was about walking into the unknown, unafraid, and that was exactly what she was going to do. Now I have to ask you, what would you have done in Clara's place? Would you have stayed and continued the fight, or would you have left to find a new path? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Because sometimes, the most important battles are not fought with swords, but with truth. And the ones who fight for it, they change the world.